online lectures, time-saving workflows and engaged students. So let me, right, so let's show you what it's all about. Here are the session aims. So we're going to explore approaches and associated technologies to help support effective teaching and learning online. I would say this is a beginner session. So I'm going to give you some examples of tools you can use just to as a baseline of getting started with teaching online using the UOP Moodle template. So if you're new to it, and I will get an idea of that in a minute from yourselves, then here's some simple things you can do, tools you can use to get going. But what I'd really like to get out of this session is that we can explore together and share your approaches to blended learning. What's really worked for you? What tools have you used? What have your students found engaging? And there will be a chance for questions at the end as well. So if you've got any issues you're facing, maybe as a group we can kind of give you some solutions or some ideas of things to try. So before we get started, could I get, so we'll do this via a raise of hands. So I'm looking at the participants. Could you go to the participants button on your screen and can you raise your hand if you've used the Moodle template? Have you used it this term? Or put your hand up in the window. That's absolutely fine as well. Great stuff. So I'm seeing a few hands in the window. Not many in the participants thing, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to assume that the people who haven't raised their hands haven't used it. So we've got a few people that have used it and people that haven't. So I will go through my slides on what you can do with the template to start with, and then we'll open it up a bit wider at the end for a discussion portion of things. So right, let's have a look. So I'm sticking to this rule for this part of things. So keep it simple. So these are the main tools you'll use just to keep it simple in terms of delivering online. And then we'll expand that a bit further at the end to some more things you can do, some more engaging, interesting things. So we'll assume you're on your Moodle module and you've had the template applied, and this is what it looks like. So you've got some guidance notes here telling you what should really go in each section just to get started. So there's talk of recorded lectures distributed via a Moodle book. I'll expand that a bit further in a minute. You'll probably post your accompanying slides and a knowledge check activity. And then there's talk of group collaboration activities and what those are and what you can include, and further reading. So I just wanted to distill down really what each of those three sections is about, because what we're delivering with the Moodle template is flipped learning. So there's a certain amount of self-paced study at the start of the week where students work through the materials on their own, at their own pace, and they've got plenty of time to reflect on it and take part in knowledge check activities. There's and that the beauty of that is that when they get to the group collaboration activities later in the week, they can really hone their knowledge a bit further. They can talk to other students, they can ask questions of academics, and they really get a chance to explore that knowledge they've acquired. I'm just going to change one thing on my setup because I've realised I haven't put my notes on the screen. That would help me. Apologies for that. There we go, great stuff. Okay, thank you. Cool, thanks for that. And there's a further reading section, and the main purpose of that is to encourage students to become independent learners. So to get them to read past the materials that you've provided for them and try to get them to search out knowledge and explore a bit further. So that's really what the main purposes are for those three sections of the template, and it's how flipped learning is structured. So, however, if you came to the Cracker Barrel sessions over the lunchtime period today, what was coming out of the discussions really was that we recommended in the summer a pre-recorded lecture structure to things. So you pre-record your lecture, you make that available, students work through it, and they do a knowledge check activity to make sure that they understand what they've learned, and you can check students have understood. But you can also deliver it as a live lecture, and I think that's what came out of the discussions we had over lunch, is that there's not always enough time to produce a pre-recorded lecture, and actually sometimes you can put too much emphasis on the pre-recorded lecture and put too much information in there and pack it out. It's too much for you as academics sometimes to produce that lecture in time, and sometimes we're finding that students aren't watching those pre-recorded lectures because they don't have enough time to watch that lecture and come to the seminar as well. They've got a lot of units they're studying at the same time. So we're finding some academics are changing the way they structure their lectures. So they're doing shorter lectures with a more with time for a discussion. So you could have a 20-minute lecture with a discussion element as part of that. Or we'd encourage you to break down your lecture into smaller parts. So you could have bite-sized chunks, which is scaffolded with activities and resources in between them, just so students don't get overloaded or bored really with listening to a long lecture. You want to keep them engaged, and you want them to kind of work through it gradually. So there's two ways you can look at it. You could do a pre-recorded lecture or a live lecture, which I think the live lecture really will build a bit more engagement with students, and it is also a bit of a time saving in terms of overall time to produce it, which is useful for academics. So we probably use Panopto for pre-recorded lectures, and we'd probably recommend that you use Zoom and something like Padlet for a live lecture. So Zoom is your web conferencing tool, and you've got access to Zoom, WebEx, and Google Meet. But for reasons I'll go on to it a little bit later, Zoom is probably the best tool for most situations. Padlet is a tool which will help you check students' engagement and help facilitate discussion. We're going to do a Padlet activity as part of this session. So if you haven't used Padlet before, you'll get a chance to see what that is in practice a little bit later. When we first rolled out the UOP module template, we recommended that you break down recorded lectures, if you're doing a pre-recorded lecture, into bite-sized chunks and distribute those via the pages of Moodle books. And there's some real wins for that. Students don't feel too overwhelmed. They can work through each section. They'll be able to see the timings for each section, and it won't feel like an hour's lecture. It will be 5 to 10 minute bite-sized chunks of each of those sections, and then you can more easily scaffold in between those sections. But since we rolled out the template, we've now got access to Panopto, which is a really useful tool for recording lecture material. But what you'll find with Panopto, it has a lot of tools within the box that will help you do some of that scaffolding and knowledge checking within the package. So For instance, you can use a Panopto quiz to check students' knowledge at various points within your video. So you could record it as one long recording. You can use the content links within your Panopto video to signpost the various sections of each topic, along with the timings. And you can also put questions after each section. So as students work through it, they get to a certain, you imagine a situation where students are just pressing play on your pre-recorded lecture and they're letting it wash over them until they get to the end. They're not really taking all of it in. So at strategic points throughout the lecture, you can drop in a question and students can't go on any further until they've answered that question. So you're providing a call to action. You're asking them to do something before they can move on to check how they've done in that section. So it keeps them engaged. It gives you a good idea of how many students have understood what you've delivered, because that can help influence any recap activities or the subjects that you can bring up in a group session. So if I move on to the next slide. So there's a bit more. Really, what I'll do is I'll pop all these animations were a last minute addition, which is not worked out too great. But anyway, in the weekly introduction, there are some other bits of information that you should really include. So supporting material such as accompanying slides, your PowerPoint slides maybe that you've presented from, include those in the section so students can read through those. They can explore more detailed parts of the slides, maybe if you have a graph that they'd like to zoom in on, or an infographic which you may not spend too much time on within the lecture. Students may want to explore that in more detail. So we'd encourage you to put your slides on the site as well. Obviously, any core reading, provide links to the Talus Aspire reading list, which goes along with that topic. That's always useful. And importantly, provide a space for students to ask questions. We've been discussing recently how students have raised that when they in a live lecture, if they walked into the lecture theatre, students miss the opportunity to talk to other students about the lecture when they leave. So imagine students walking into a lecture theatre, absorbing all this information. They've got lots of questions. They walk out the door and they like talking to their friends and kind of comparing notes and trying to kind of clarify bits they didn't quite understand. So whether you deliver a pre-recorded lecture or a live lecture, gives students the opportunity and the space to be able to ask questions and to discuss it a bit further. For a pre-recorded lecture, we'd recommend a Padlet board. It's Padlet is a canvas which lets you post-it note style responses in various structured ways. So if you provide a link to a Padlet board, students will be able to, after they've viewed the recorded lecture, they can go in and drop a post-it note on there and read responses from other students. Maybe you're all misunderstanding the same point, or maybe you can help other students out with their questions that they've had. But it provides a space for students to ask questions and to compare notes, really. In terms of live lectures, so if you deliver a lecture via Zoom, a good bit of practice maybe is to leave time at the end for questions. So once the lecture has finished, you can leave the Zoom session running and encourage students to stick around and discuss the subject matter. So whether you stay there as an academic or not and answer some of those questions, or whether you just leave it as a space for students to compare notes and to say what they think, really. It's a good bit of practice just to leave some time at the end with that recorded session still running, so students can talk it over. So the group collaboration activity is really where students get together, and here's a few examples of what a group collaboration activity could be. A team working task, a seminar discussion activity, a recap activity based on the knowledge check, or a chance to ask questions and solidify their understanding. In terms of tools that you'd use for that, so this is a seminar discussion. You would apologies. So for a seminar discussion, you'd normally use something like a Zoom session, but you could also provide an activity via Padlet again, just to kind of structure those activities. I wanted to cover this slide really, just to give you an idea of, because I'm quite conscious that we have 3 different web conferencing tools available for you to use. So we've got Zoom, WebEx and Google Meet. 2 of those are quite similar. Zoom and WebEx are quite similar, and Google Meet's just slightly different. It's a bit more freeform. When you're choosing your tool to deliver either live lectures or a seminar discussion activity, ease of use is obviously quite key. Both Zoom, WebEx and Google Meet are very easy to use. It's quite straightforward. When you've used one, you can probably use the others quite well. But a key requirement or feature of the system is the recording. So if you deliver a live lecture, you almost certainly want to record it and make it available to students. Zoom is the only software we have that will automatically upload it to Panopto for you. So you hit record at the start of your session and press stop. It goes off to Panopto, and then you can very easily share it back via Moodle to students. With both WebEx and Google Meet, you'll have to download those recordings, re-upload them to Panopto, wait for it to process. It's all very, very manual. So this will save you some time if you use Zoom rather than any of the other 2 platforms. Both Zoom and WebEx have a presenter and student role, so that means that you can mute students when you're presenting, or you can hand over presenting rights to a particular student if you want them to show something. So it's very much a student and teacher type of role within Zoom and WebEx. Google Meet is very much more freeform. It's very good as a discussion tool, but everyone can talk at the same time. Everyone can present something. It's very good for discussions, but if you want something that's more a led session, then Zoom or WebEx are the way to go. Zoom historically has been very, very good in terms of breakout rooms. We purchased a license for Zoom because of its breakout room functionality. It's very easy to create breakout rooms on the fly and put students into them. WebEx now does have breakout rooms as well, but as I say, I think Panopto is the best way to go in a lot of situations, because it has breakout rooms, but it also has that recording sync functionality. Each of the tools will let you deliver to up to 200 participants at once, 300 with WebEx. But if you want to do some really large sessions, we've been asked recently for how you present to a lot of students, so over that 200 participant kind of mark, then it's worth thinking about Google Meet. It's not actually I'm talking about it in this session, but for most of you, you won't need to do this, but it's worth bearing in mind. If you ever need to deliver conference sessions or to very large groups of students, then maybe Google Meet with which is live streamed is worth bearing in mind. But as I say, in most situations, Zoom is the package you use for most purposes. So there we go. In the final section of the UOP module template, you have a further reading extension activity section. So this is for useful news or journal articles, online resources for students to go off and explore, engaging blogs that you want to encourage students to go off and read, and maybe other Moodle activities that you have available. So these are things that are not the students don't have to do this. It's not a prerequisite to do these things to take part in the discussion activity, but they are resources that will help them understand the materials a bit deeper, and they're good things for students to go off and explore if they want to a bit more knowledge on a particular subject. These are normally web links, or they are Moodle activities. Okay, so that's a quick run through of some of the tools you could use for each of those sections. But I think really this session will get most out of it if we share our own experiences. So I've put together a Padlet board. I've talked about Padlet a few times, but this should hopefully give you an idea of what Padlet is and how it works. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. So if you could follow this link once I find the chat. There it is. Okay, so if you can follow that link that's now in the chat window, and it will take you to a Padlet board, which looks something like this. So I've split this down into three columns. So this is called a shelf within Padlet. It's just the kind of the structure of the Canvas page. So what tools or approaches have you used to deliver teaching? What tools have you used to encourage students to collaborate? And are you doing something completely different? What's worked for you? Once we've got some ideas up here, we'll throw it open so we can kind of chat it through a bit further. Great stuff. Okay, so using Panopto for short bite-sized lectures, that's a really good bit of advice. What tools have you used to encourage students to collaborate? So Padlet, poll everywhere. That's another handy one. Interesting. Are you doing something completely different? Animated videos to create a different way of engaging students instead of standard live videos, and to break down content into something that's easily digested. Great stuff. That's a really nice way of breaking up the material. Okay, I'm going to scroll the page down a little bit further. Okay. So Panopto for 3-minute topic summaries. What's it all about? Type videos. That's a good idea. I'm part of the team teaching at RAF Holton, and we created a course on the VLE. I'll let you keep typing. I won't read it out as people are still typing. Apologies. Pre-recorded lectures and live Zoom Q&A sessions. Okay. Okie dokie. I'm part of a team teaching at RAF Holton, and we created. Oh, we're still sorry. So live Zoom lectures with questions. Can't always see everyone though, with cameras off. Yeah, we've had people mention that before, about how you encourage students to turn their cameras on, so you got to get a bit of feedback so you can see if they're engaged or not. One way possibly to do that is to call on people individually. So if they've got the cameras off, maybe you ask them to unmute, but you call out someone specifically with a question. That can work quite well. H5P, using quizzes and interactive videos in a formative sense. Yes, H5P is a great package for building interactivity into your Moodle units. If you structure your videos using a Moodle book, you can use H5P very, very easily between the chapters. So you can have test the knowledge activities where you put in short questions, which are very interactive. So you can have matching questions and multiple choice type questions. But you can also do some really fun stuff with H5P in terms of reflection. There's a really good documentation tool within H5P which lets you set out questions, which in a form type layout, so students can answer specific questions and reflect on certain activities, and it outputs a PDF form which they can keep hold of. And you can get them to do the same exercise again later on. So as a reflective activity, you can build really, really nice structured workflows using H5P. But it's well worth exploring that a bit further. H5P has some really fun and interactive elements. Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much for contributing to that. I just wanted to use Panopto briefly. Sorry, I wanted to use Padlet briefly, just to show you how that works. Hopefully, you've seen some different examples of what people are using, and you can see how Padlet works in practice. Let's go back to our slides. What's probably a good idea now, though, is if anyone's brave enough to unmute and so throw some questions in. So, is there anything you're working on at the moment that you'd like some help with? What has worked well for you? What would you like more help with? Is anyone any burning questions?
Mike, I'm really not too hot on the using the Moodle book thing. I don't know whether perhaps you could briefly go through that if it doesn't bore everyone else.
No, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, the book is really straightforward. Actually, it's probably one of the easiest Moodle activities to use, but it's really good for structuring content. So you can put all sorts of things into a book. So let's jump to my demo course. Okay, I'm going to switch editing on, and I'm going to, okay, so once you've got editing switched on, we press add an activity or resource, and I'm going to press the book activity. And to get started, you just need a name for the book, so a title. So I'm going to say pre-recorded lecture. You don't have to put a description in there, but it's a good piece of practice to put an estimated study time. So how long will this take the students to work through? Let's say it's going to take 45 minutes, and I'll press save and display. And that creates the structure of the book. And now we just need to add in our first chapter title. So the chapters are, if you think of a normal paper book, The chapters are the sections within that particular book. So we're going to do a lecture on thermodynamics. So let's say introduction to thermodynamics. So that's what will appear to a student in the list of chapters, and then you've got a space for the content. So what you could do is that this could be typed content. You could type directly into this box or copy existing content in. You can embed H5P activities within the chapters. That's a good thing to do, because those are really interactive elements that you can include. But quite typically, what you'll do is you'll include a recorded video. So you've got a Panopto button up here. So if I press that, it will give me access to all my Panopto videos in all the folders. So I'll very simply, so here's a lecture or a section of a lecture that I recorded previously. So I'll tick that one and I'll insert it. And as simple as that, it'll insert an embedded Panopto video into that section. I'll press Save Changes. And there's my first chapter. So the link appears on the right-hand side. And then this is the video that we inserted. So we talked in a previous session about scaffolding videos. Rather than having one long video that the students may disengage with, what you're probably best off doing is breaking it down into smaller parts. So this is my first video, which is a bit smaller than we'd say about 5 to 10 minutes is a good time to stick to in terms of those individual videos. I'll press the plus button. I'll add a new chapter, and in that chapter, maybe you'll put in an activity that the students can work on. So a H5P question, or some text which expands on the point in the previous chapter. Does that work for you, Cheryl?
That's brilliant. Thank you. That's really helpful explanation. Thanks very much.
No problems. Anyone else got any questions they'd like some help with? Okie dokie. Right. Back to my slides then. So couple more things just to tell you about. So we've got a couple of useful Moodle modules that you might find handy. We have the principles of online design. So I've covered a whistle-stop tour really of what's in the template for Moodle. But if you follow this link, I'll drop it in the chat now. This is a Moodle course which will take you through the template and just cover it in a bit more detail. So if you're unsure about anything I've covered, please take a look at that course and it will take you through the basics of that. We also have a further course, which is kind of the more advanced version of this course. So once you've got the basics, then you may want to move on to this one, which is the active blended learning course, which takes some of those concepts a bit further. So some of the underpinning pedagogy and how you can be a bit more creative with those with your activities you're delivering via Moodle. So that's the second link in the chat. And finally, we have some useful resources. We have an academic events calendar. Really encourage you to have a look at that for courses run by some colleagues in some of the. So I've really whizzed over quite a lot of these tools as we've gone through it. But if you want to explore those in a bit more detail, if anything that I've covered, you thought actually I'd like to know a little bit more about that, I'd like to explore it in more detail, we almost certainly offer an event for that on the events calendar. So go and have a look at that one. We also have a video. So I've put together a video kind of showing you some quick wins with Panopto. So how to create those knowledge check questions and how to structure videos very, very easily. And that's available to you. And finally, we have, and I'll share the link for this one in the chat because it's really quite useful. We have step-by-step guides for Panopto, Zoom, WebEx, all of the bits of software that I've mentioned today, and a load more. So if you want to work through some guides, some step-by-step guides, so you can experiment on your own, please take a look at that site because it's got some really useful resources. But as I say, the academic events calendar is great as well because you can go along to a session and work with Tom and the rest of the team on some, when you have time. Okay, that's the end of my materials. Has anyone got any final questions? Great stuff. Okay, thanks for coming along today. It's been a very long day. I'm personally really quite tired, but it's been really motivational. I think we've got covered some really good stuff today. So we will post recordings of these sessions on the Minifest website, which I'm sure you're familiar with as you got to this session. So later in the week, we'll post those videos and they'll be available to you. And thank you very much for coming on and supporting the event. I hope you've got some good hints and tips out of the day.